Why, hello there, old sports. While it has been heavily debated how many lives were affected and ultimately ended by William Afton within the Five Nights at Freddy's series, there has been one thing lost on William Afton's mission for the secrets on controlling life and death that many don't even consider. While not every crime committed by Afton was done within his beloved Spring Bonnie costume, many were, including his most infamous and devastating crime of the missing children's incident. Now, while Spring Bonnie out of the FNaF universe was created specifically to be a second skin for the Purple Man to aid in his dirty work and even to become his tomb, I think many people forget that in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, Spring Bonnie was made to entertain and ultimately make children happy, just like their partner Fredbear. Yet, as time has gone on, the line between William Afton and Spring Bonnie has blurred more and more, and not in favor of the rabbit. The series has gone out of its way to keep Spring Bonnie's character away from the audience, and this could be for various reasons. Thus, this only leaves us with the twisted costume Afton used to commit his heinous crimes. Because that's just the thing. Spring Bonnie is supposed to be Fredbear's partner on stage. They most likely had their own personality and character assigned to them to make the performance more well-rounded. But now, Spring Bonnie has been purely reduced to the disguise of a killer. While if these were real events, the actual children whose lives were cut short would be unambiguously more tragic, I think it's unfortunate that William managed to functionally kill a fictional character in and out of the fictional universe he is from himself, as another fictional character. So today, I kind of just want to talk about Spring Bonnie, what we know about them, what we don't, and their importance to the series in general, in and out of suit mode. Because even if they haven't been around as long as someone like Golden Freddy, aka Fredbear, they've arguably grown to become probably the most important mascot in the whole series, maybe even usurping Freddy himself. But anyways, let's actually begin this video properly, starting with what we actually know about our favorite yellow rabbit. Well, to start at the beginning, Spring Bonnie is one of the earliest known characters to exist under the Fazbear brand, if we don't include characters that were absorbed from other companies like Murray's Costume Manor. And while we don't know if they've been around as long as Fredbear, who we know has existed since the 30s, the earliest restaurants we see in the series tend to show Spring Bonnie up on stage next to wherever Fredbear was supposed to stand and perform. We don't know if Spring Bonnie continued to be used after the Bite of '83, or the Big Bite, where their partner Fredbear seemed to have been retired, considering he was the one who committed the act. But we definitely do know that their use as a character probably did stop once the Springlock suits were decommissioned, and they couldn't use the main animatronic anymore, so I don't see why Fazbear would continue using the character. And in terms of Spring Bonnie as a character, that's pretty much all we know about them removed from William and his crimes. Beyond a dubiously canon description blurb connected to a Sanshi plushie, we know pretty much nothing about Spring Bonnie's personality as a mascot. Part of this might also be because, at least in the grand scheme of the whole timeline, Spring Bonnie probably didn't exist as their own mascot for very long. Both Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were eventually replaced by the newer iterations of Freddy and Bonnie, who had much less baggage tied to them. So combine the fact they didn't exist by themselves for very long, on top of the fact that Fazbear Entertainment seems to be concerningly good at cover-ups. The farther we go from the glory days of Fredbear's Family Diner, the more info is lost, or purposely buried, about that time frame. You might have even also picked up on the fact that I've been using they/them pronouns for Spring Bonnie, and that's because FNaF World brings up the question of their gender in the first place. And no other part of the franchise really refers to Spring Bonnie as he or she, at least off the top of my head. In fact, most of the time, things that take on the appearance of Spring Bonnie are referred to as an it, but that's just probably because those things are inhuman representations of Afton, rather than Spring Bonnie as their own character. Slightly unrelated to who Spring Bonnie is as a character, but we never even really had a clear or official depiction of them in a non-damaged form for the longest time. In both FNaF 3 and FNaF 4, we had minigame sprites of them, but those are far from consistent, and only have the necessary details to make sure the audience knows what they're seeing, unless they don't. So it's hard to call those optimal depictions, even if they are official. Our first somewhat good detailed look at them was in the Fruity Maze minigame of FNaF 6, where we see William in the costume looming over Susie before he lured her away. But before Help Wanted, we never actually had an official Spring Bonnie model, and even then, we only found a more traditional Spring Bonnie model compared to the one used for Glitch Trap by looking through the game files. And it's not even clear if Glitch Trap is supposed to be its own character or a depiction of Spring Bonnie that actually existed. So if we know next to nothing about Spring Bonnie's personality, we barely have seen a good look at their official model, and we don't even know their character's gender, it kind of asks the question of why we know so little about Spring Bonnie in the first place, and why the series goes out of its way to almost hide them from us. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, and just now, much information about Spring Bonnie has purposefully been hidden from us. So to be quite honest, there's not actually much we know about Spring Bonnie at all. Part of this is technically because Spring Bonnie was most likely made after Springtrap Out of Universe by Scott Cawthon when designing Five Nights at Freddy's 3, while obviously in universe, it was the other way around. So since Spring Bonnie was made to be the original form of Springtrap in a sense, their importance as a character is inseparably tied to that eventual fate. Spring Bonnie exists to give context to Springtrap as a character. Thus, their relevance to us as the audience tends to be limited. Because on top of all of that, since we know William performed as Spring Bonnie before using the character as a disguise to lure in his victims, at least in the book's continuity, there is a very real possibility much of Spring Bonnie's character, or persona, was created and embodied by William in the first place. So yet again, we see this pattern of blurring the lines between William Afton the man and Spring Bonnie the mascot character. Of course, I think this is on purpose, because in the rare case we're ever supposed to see Spring Bonnie as their own character, any gaps in the idea of Spring Bonnie are meant to be filled directly by William, or us as the audience is supposed to assume that Spring Bonnie takes on qualities of William. And I do mean the rare case, because FNaF doesn't actually give us glimpses of the mascots' personalities as mascots that often. Outside of the UCN, and occasional moments including the core 4 band members, we almost solely see each mascot as either the dangerous monster who hunts us, or the poor tortured souls who are stuck in metal prisons. Like I said, I think UCN is one of the only times we really get personalities for the various characters that might actually apply to the characters they are supposed to represent on stage. Spring Bonnie suffers from this the most, because to my knowledge, the only time we've ever really seen them in one of these big get-together games without containing William is in FNaF World, where they don't even really get to show off their personality much. Really the only character with a personality in that game is Fredbear. And as mentioned earlier, the most we get to know about Spring Bonnie specifically is that their gender is either ambiguous or irrelevant. But even then, considering how many ties Spring Bonnie has to William, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you're never even really supposed to consider the possibility they aren't male. It's a rabbit. Who cares? And as I said before, I don't think this is lazy writing whatsoever. I would actually be surprised if this wasn't all completely purposeful. I find it incredibly ironic that, at least in the books, William sees himself more in Spring Bonnie than as a human man. Yet, despite not knowing much about the character's personality, I think any children's mascot would be horrified, or disgusted, or maybe even both, by who William Afton truly is deep down inside. But of course, William himself probably doesn't care, or even register that idea. Maybe once, William and Spring Bonnie acted in sync, one shaping the other. But as the series goes on, Spring Bonnie goes from a persona for William to express himself as a performer, to a shield to hide from the consequences of his actions, up until the very end of his natural life. Over time, more and more of Spring Bonnie was consumed by William until the innards of the character were completely gone, leaving the perfect Afton-sized hole for William to fill. We don't get to learn much about Spring Bonnie as a character, because it doesn't really matter who Spring Bonnie was, only what became of their body and visage. Just like in the minigames, the exact minor details don't really matter. They don't even really need to exist as far as we're concerned. Only what is required to get the fans and audience to start thinking, or maybe even understand some basic details. And ultimately, what was to be understood should be very clear to all of you. The character, Spring Bonnie, was taken by William Afton, gutted, and worn as a skin suit. The trust that people, and especially children, had for the character was capitalized on and abused by a man draped in shadowy purple to steal the lives away of so many before they even really had a chance to begin. The perfect wolf in rabbit's clothing. A twisted perversion of something meant to spark joy, wonder, happiness, and warmth to so many, went on to be a symbol of pain, horror, sadness, and coldness to just as many. Even if the yellow rabbit managed to convince his victims he was their friend, even after they were trapped in their metal tombs, the true source of their agony and suffering never really changed. It always stemmed back to him. Empty coffins were buried by grieving parents, unaware that the harmless mascot prancing around the building they took their child to was anything but. All to get closure that their children would never get until years later. And even by then, even after the souls of those poor children got their revenge on their killer by causing him to be crushed within the skin of his most forgotten victim, all they ended up doing in that moment was giving him a new life. Spring Bonnie might have died the moment Afton donned that costume, but upon the birth of Springtrap, that character would forever be forgotten, erased, and reduced to the second chance for a man who deserved no such thing. While other versions of old characters ended up coming back later in the timeline in an official brand capacity and got another chance to stand on the stage, Spring Bonnie was burned away with William Afton at the end of his second life, their visage only allowed to pop back up in the shadows of Freddy's, waiting to strike once again. Rabbits may be prey animals, but this one sure isn't. Not anymore. They will forever be the apex predator looming over Fazbear Entertainment, until the company is eventually shut down or forgotten. And maybe that's for the best. My apologies if I ended up getting a bit fired up in that last section. I just felt a bit poetic, I guess. Ultimately, like I said, in universe, the loss of the children is much more impactful than a yellow cartoon bunny. But out of universe, I find it fascinating that the thing William managed to kill the most was never even real to begin with. Because all of his victims clung to life as spirits, and eventually got to move on to something greater. But in universe, Spring Bonnie will eventually be forgotten along with William. And while William burns in the lakes of fire, Spring Bonnie will be left to fade into oblivion. But maybe that's better than the alternative in this case. Who knows? I'd like to thank you all for your time today, and for watching this video. Your patience, time, and care mean the world to me. I have plans for future FNaF videos, because to be honest, that's what I want to make videos on right now. So I hope you stick around and give me a chance. If you have any FNaF related video essays, challenge runs, or whatever that you'd like to see from me, I'd love to hear your input. And if you're a fan of mine with little interest in FNaF, I apologize, but I don't really enjoy forcing myself to make videos I don't want to make, and I worry the quality suffers along with my lack of motivation. And of course, I'd also like to thank my Patreon members, Golden One, and Somebody, as well as my YouTube channel members, Wally73, Sven Biscuit, and Amarin98, for their continued financial support. It truly means the world to me. Also, I tend to record these outros right after I'm done editing the main video to make sure I'm as up to date as I can be with my Patreon and YouTube members. So this will be the first video I make after the announcement of a break. And while I'll probably not start working on new things until the end of March, this video and one other were almost done when I decided to announce my break. So I just decided to finish them so I wasn't withholding anything from you all. Either way, once again, thank you for watching this video and sharing some of your time with me today. If you could share this video around, or even just like the video, that would probably help this video in the algorithm, and thus it would just help me make more. I know there's a very good chance this will never be a job, but hey, it's good to dream, right? And while we're dreaming, make sure to have a good night, or whatever time it is for you, and I'll see you on the flip side.